Hi folks, today we're going to discuss some good books on early Buddhism. Recommended. Hi folks, I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. And today we're going to look at some good books about early Buddhism. A lot of people want to know sort of where do they begin to read about early Buddhism to get some knowledge of it. And there's a lot of books out there. Some are better than others. Some are, and my interest is generally relatively scholarly, so I'm going to be picking out some books by Buddhist scholars, people who are real specialists and who've been around for quite a while, have a deep, good understanding of the subject matter. But I'll start with a collection of the suttas. That would be this one, In the Buddha's Words, translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And I'll include these books down below in the comments area so that you don't have to write them down while I'm talking. This book, this is a collection of suttas from the texts. Bhikkhu Bodhi's translated all the suttas in the four major Nikayas, and they're over on the bookshelf behind me. So you might say, why would I want this one as well as the whole collection? And the answer is that it's useful sometimes if you're looking for a particular subject to have that subject pulled out for you already. And for people who are just getting into this topic, they might not want to get all of those large, thick books. This one is a good relative. I mean, it's still thick, but it has a significant number of the most important suttas in the canon. It's a good way to sort of get started, to read around, to get a feel for what reading these suttas is like. The style is not like writing that we have today. It's repetitive in a sense. Now, Bhikkhu Bodhi goes a long way towards eliminating some of that repetition because it's not very readable, but it's there in order to make these passages more memorizable, because originally they would have been recited orally, memorized orally. And so in order to help that, there were many, many, many repetitions in the texts. But still, even beneath those repetitions, there's plenty of really, really good information there. They're dialogues, most of them, so a lot of it's very readable. A lot of it comes to life, brings to life what life might have been like in India at that time. So in any event, that's a good place to start. Another one that I really recommend is Rupert Gethin's Buddhism, Introduction, Foundations of Buddhism. It really is a Foundations of Buddhism book. It's a really good introduction. Mine's, as you can see, is sort of I got it used. Really, really good stuff here. Gethin is one of the top scholars in the field, and this is a really good place to start. If I had to pick one book for somebody who's just getting into this study or wants to learn about early Buddhism and really doesn't know anything about it, this is the place to start. And it's not expensive either. It shouldn't be, and you can probably get it used. Another really good one, Williams, Tribe, and Wynn's Buddhist Thought. It's a little this as opposed to the Gethin, this deals a lot with Mahayana as well, and so later developments in Buddhist thought. It's not just about the early stuff. Paul Williams is an expert on the Mahayana, but it's excellent, really well written, very clear, a little bit more textbooky than the Gethin, but still well worth it. I started when I was at university. This is one of the books that I read, What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. This is actually my copy. It's quite old. It's kind of falling apart. Rahula is a fantastic author. He was a Buddhist monk. He knew the material backwards and forwards. This comes from a very traditional kind of understanding. It's a little dated now, and perhaps not as scholarly as some of the other material. It takes a lot of the commentarial literature a little bit more seriously than most modern scholars would. In fact, than really any modern scholar would. Nevertheless, it is a great place to start. Rahula is a very good writer and does understand the material extremely well. Again, it's a place that it's a book you'll probably find in a lot of university level courses. This one by Richard Gombrich, What the Buddha Thought. So you can see it's an homage to Walpole's book. Gombrich was a sort of a semi-colleague with Rahula for many years, a friend of Rahula's, learned from Rahula. And Gombrich, though, was a retired recently, but a very eminent scholar of early Buddhism and Pali and Sanskrit at Oxford. And this book is fantastic. The only reason I would not recommend it quite as highly as the Gethin is because it's not an intro book so much. It comes across as that when you look at it from the outside, and for the title. But really, it's sort of a second or third rank book where once you understand the intro material pretty well, then you can come to this one and get sort of an understanding of where contemporary scholarship is. Now, some of Gombrich's ideas are considered still a little bit controversial. Many of them aren't, but there are a few that are. So when you read this book, you have to understand that some of the stuff in it is sort of Gombrich's take, his understanding of what the texts show, but not necessarily agreed upon by all scholars. Although very little, there's not much besides the basics that is agreed upon by all scholars. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a fantastic book, extremely well written. Gombrich is an extremely lucid writer, so it's very easy to read, somewhat philosophical. He would say not. He sort of says he doesn't know anything about philosophy, but that's not true. He's got a good, clear mind. So this is a very good book. Another book which you might think, why would I recommend this? Theravada Buddhism, also by Richard Gombrich. Theravada is the school of Buddhism in Southeast Asia. It is the school of Buddhism that takes the Nikayas, that is this early material, as canonical, as its sort of only canonical material. It doesn't take the later Mahayana texts as canonical. As a result, there's a tighter link between Theravada Buddhism and the early Nikaya Buddhism than there are between other schools. The reason this book is very good is that, as well as discussing the history of Theravada Buddhism, he also spends quite a while, in fact, really almost most of the book, discussing early Buddhism and the Buddha. In many ways, this is actually more introductory than this, strangely enough. Although not about the Theravada tradition, but about the Buddha. So that is, again, highly recommended. You can almost start there. Almost. Again, Gethin would probably be better first. If you don't really understand, if you don't know much about the Buddha Dharma to begin with, then Gethin is the place to start. This is another very interesting book. Johannes Bronkhorst has written a lot. He's one of the great top scholars of the early material, Buddhist teaching in India. Again, this is a very, very lucidly written book, very clear, very interesting. A lot of what Bronkhorst writes is also very controversial, but it's controversy that comes out of somebody who really, really deeply knows the material and has a long, long history with it. So for that reason alone, it's worth reading. And Bronkhorst and Gombrich are sort of antagonists. They're friends, but they're antagonists in certain ways. Obviously, there are certain things they don't agree with each other. Bronkhorst, in particular, doesn't think that Brahmanism had as much of an influence on early Buddhism as Gombrich does. But it's good, if you really want to get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff, Bronkhorst is good, and there's a lot of really good material in there, as well as some that's controversial as well. And last but not least, I'm going to recommend this book, Satibatana by Analayo. This is Satibatana, The Direct Path to Realization. This is a fantastic book. Analayo is a monk, a German monk, and this is his PhD dissertation. And you might think that a PhD dissertation would make a dry book, and it is scholarly. It's not a book that you can read with the same facility that you can read some of the other ones. It has a lot of footnotes, detailed footnotes, but for most people who are interested in Buddhism nowadays, this is a really superb book, and I have a lot of friends who are not scholars who nevertheless loved it. And the reason is that the Satipatthana is a particular sutta in the canon that is the sutta that introduces mindfulness meditation. Arguably, it's the earliest written evidence we have for meditation, certainly of any detail. It is the earliest. It's a fantastic sutta to begin with, packed with a lot of it's very dense sutta. And so it needs unpacking. What Analayo has done is to unpack that sutta, to talk about all of the different aspects of mindfulness meditation as they were originally intended, or as they might have originally been intended, which really does involve unpacking almost the entirety of the Dharma in terms of meditation. Because if you begin to pull out a thread from the Satipatthana, from that sutta, from the Satipatthana Sutta, that thread will pull pretty much everything else with it. So even though this is a book on its face about mindfulness meditation, once you look at it, you realize it's a sutta, it's a book that is about the whole Dharma, the whole Dhamma. For that reason, it makes a really, really good introduction. Because if you are interested in meditation, if you're interested in mindfulness meditation, and don't really have an introduction to Buddhism per se, you can get to it through this book. That said, it's not quite as readable as some of the others. It is a little bit more dense, although it does not come across to me as an early PhD dissertation. It comes across to me as a mature work. And Analayo is presently one of a handful of the very, very top scholars in the field. He's actually well known now for translating material out of Chinese into English and comparing our Chinese versions of the Nikayas to the Pali versions, which is an ongoing process, of very, very interesting process. And he's really one of the leading people in that. So anyway, that is a selection of some really good books if you're interested in an introduction to early Buddhism. Again, if you had to choose one, I would say the Gethin, Foundations of Buddhism, just because it is very introductory, but also very, very good from one of the top scholars in the field. So thank you very much for watching. Please put any comments or questions you have down below, and any topics you'd like me to deal with in a future video. I'm always looking for good, interesting ideas. And again, thanks a lot.